thank you for everyone for joining. We're just going to let everyone settle in. And I hope everyone finds themselves comfortable in a comfortable place this afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Please, could you keep your audio on mute for the moment, just so that nothing interrupts our wonderful panel's conversation. We are going to host the conversation for about 40 to 45 minutes, maybe a bit longer, depending on how much everyone wants to say. And then we're going to have a point for people to ask questions at the end. So please do put your questions in the chat. I'm going to get started about the introduction to the program. And if anyone misses this, it will be recorded. So hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. So welcome to everyone to Publishing Shifts South Asia, the first talk of Art Murmur times Guftgu, which Art South Asia Project and Offset Projects have been working on together probably for over a year. So it's really exciting to launch the first talk. This series highlights contemporary publishing in the field of modern and contemporary South Asian visual and applied arts, and it brings perspectives from experts in the field. And the program will seek to throw light on new practices and solidarities through printed matter in the region. I want to give a huge thanks to the Faizal Shabana Foundation and QissaGoi for supporting this project, who without their support, we wouldn't be able to put together this wonderful program for you all. Anshika and I have been working on this together. We've been curating the selection of speakers, the writers, and it's been a delight to kind of bring in both of our perspectives into this program. I'm going to introduce ASAP, and then I'm going to hand over to Anshika to introduce Offset Projects. So Art South Asia Project is a UK-based nonprofit arts education and development platform established in 2021. We support the infrastructure of modern and contemporary visual and applied arts in South Asia by facilitating and expanding regional and international networks of collaboration and research. ASAP fosters regional partnerships between the countries of Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Working between South Asia and the UK, we offer grants and create opportunities for engagement through collaborative programs focused on research, archiving, and publications. We also promote professional development through workshops, talks, symposia, and fellowships, and we highlight the narratives and histories of South Asian art. Over to you, Anshika.
Thanks so much for that, Mala. Very, very excited to kick this off, and even more excited to kick this off with the two of you, NayanTara and Yogesh. Just for those of you who are joining in, we're doing all the introductions and getting them out of the way first so that we can do a deep dive with our panelists today. I'm Anshika, and I'm the founder of Offset Projects. Offset Projects is a publishing house, a photo book library, and a curatorial initiative. And we've been working with contemporary practices in photography with a specific, direction into experience-led formats, specifically looking at bookmaking practices and its relationship to photography, of course. The initiative exists within the form of a fluid collective, inviting collaborators to play and experiment within its unstructured identity. It fosters collaboration, curating exhibitions, and offering artist talks, such as this, where we are here today, workshops, residencies, reading rooms, and decentralized formats of publishing. Our publishing ethos comes from the urgency to work with the book as a site of companionship and support, centering relationship building as the core tenet of building work. We function with a focus on encouraging and platforming the evolving visual language in South Asia and beyond, and we believe that storytelling lies at the heart of human creative energy. My hope is that through Offset, we can make a tiny space where we can collect together and, critique and reflect and inquire on the works that are being produced today. That being said, I think we have two speakers today among us who are really kind of spearheading, these ideas and this movement in some ways, specifically in publishing as well. And I'm really, really happy to have both NayanTara and Yogesh here. Just to introduce you really briefly to both their practices as well. NayanTara lives and works in Kathmandu in Nepal. She is the co-founder and artistic director of Photocircle Nepal Picture Library and Photo KTM, uh, platforms and initiatives that nourish image making, history telling, and dialogic engagements with diverse publics. As a cultural organizer and curator, NayanTara enjoys working collaboratively with photographers, filmmakers, researchers, writers, translators, educators, designers, organizers. I think anyone who is up for an experiment and, up for challenging the norm of what's happening, NayanTara is ready to kind of create something new and unusual with them, to develop multidisciplinary exhibitions, publications, commissions, workshops, and many other production and cultural tools. She's committed to creating possibilities for people who think, make, speak, and organize in different ways to come together in what she calls imperfect solidarities to learn, question, disrupt, and resist, but also work towards repair. Uh, Hi, NayanTara. I'm also going to introduce you to Yogesh, who is joining us actually from Germany right now. Yogesh is a writer, poet, translator, and publisher. He's the founder and editor of Panthers Paw publication. Panthers Paw is dedicated to publishing literature by Dalit Bahujan writers in English and as translations from other Indian languages as well. He is also the author of Flowers on the Grave of Caste, which was published in 2019, a collection of short stories, Singing, Thinking, Anti-Caste, published in 2021, which is a book of essays on music and memories, and Ambedkar 2021, which was also published the same year, a book of prose and poetry. Sorry, prose poetry. His latest book is Water in a Broken Pot and Thoughts on Self as Caste and Deception. Hi, Yogesh and NT. Very, very happy to welcome you to our first program. The larger thematic under which we will be conversing today is publishing shifts South Asia. We're hoping through the talk today and through a follow up PDF that will be published on both our websites, that this theme will allow us to present ideas and emerging methodologies practiced by publishers in South Asia to bring urgent voices and ideologies to the forefront of the publishing space in the region. I do want to say one thing though, like as much as we've said this title, I also want to say this idea of publishing shifts. I mean, it's not to say that there was no publishing that was happening within these concerns and ideologies previously. Both Mala and I, while we were developing this program, I think what we were interested in was also to look at what are the ideas that are motivating publishing practices today? What are the dissatisfactions that we've seen as readers, as people involved in publishing? And what we were also curious to know from other publishers, in the current landscape. So the shift refers to more about, I think, a shift that we are acknowledging in our gaze, not in terms of practice, but I think, I'd like to kind of just get straight into it, Ante and Yogesh, if you don't mind, um, to ask you guys the same question. I mean, what were the kind of practices that you were seeing around you or systems that you were seeing around you that motivated you to get into publishing in the manner that you have with the projects that you have? And even the dissatisfactions, things that you felt were not happening and needed to be acknowledged. I know, Yogesh, um, that has a big part to play in the nature of publications that's coming out of Panthers Paw as well. So just, if you talk a little bit about what got you to come, into the publishing space in this way, that would be really nice. Over to you.
Uh, Yeah, thank you, Anshika, and thank you, Mala and NayanTara, for being here, and everyone who have joined. Uh, like, uh, like if I have to recall, about the moment which made me feel that that I must publish my story by my own, because it is not something very frequent, also a choice of career for so many people. I was simply trying to do my PhD, so I was navigating through and like doing all the stupid things all like students do when they are like when they are as a part of campus. uh, I have like as I also mentioned in a couple of more articles I have written in the past about like what basically got me into publishing. So that is a story, but the philosophy behind that is like, if I know myself, in terms of the history, basically, in terms of like who we were, and that reflection was always there when I was a student, because that is also a time when you get more time to think, and you have more time also to get disturbed by so many other things. So basically, like when I was reading something, reading means like somebody must have published in the past something which triggered me, so that connection is basically there. So when I was like navigating my student life in campus in Bombay, and I happened to translate one of the books by Mr. J.V. Pawar, one of the founding members of Dalit Panthers, and that book was in Marathi, and that book focused on the like 5 years after the death of Baba Sahib Ambedkar and the politics of it. That was in Marathi. I read that story, and then I thought, uh, until and unless you don't write your own story the way you want the world to see, the way you are, you are not going to be owning the history. And that thing basically stayed with me so far. That was also a stimulus from which I started thinking that if I don't write my story the way I want, and I don't get it out, uh, that story might die. And so many stories must have been dead so far, which means that like like we are talking about a collection of thousands of millions of stories, just because there is no resource for those people, or at with that community. It is because of the systemic discrimination that people don't get to be in the literary imagination, like how in one nation state or one community always dominates any literary imagination. And I was thinking on these dimensions also, and I was thinking, we with millions, we as a community in such a huge number is basically not, I haven't seen them at least visible, even visible in English imagination, because that's the language I was pursuing for 12, 13 years, from the point of learning it to the moment of thinking and writing about writing in it. So I thought like, this language is my politics and publishing is my agenda, in order to write, and also in order to make other people from my community write in whichever language they do. But I kept my focus on translations in English. So that was the as I said, that like there is something spiritual or something philosophical, like you reflect on your experience. So I have been reflecting on that experience of mine, thinking about that, just in the absence of publishing resources for the people who want to write their stories, so many people must have been invisibilized, and I mean, whether it sounds utopian or not, but this is something like uh, get me interested in publishing. And not only publishing, I I I started seeing as a process of producing your own stories, not just writing it, not just asserting it. Because after assertion, you need to own that assertion, and for that you need resource. And publishing is a resource for owning anything in terms of history or literature, or telling the world that you are there, you are not invisible. So that was the moment, very striking, a very important moment in my life, which got me into publishing. And of course, like, as I said, like, I haven't seen, I mean, not only my community, but also many other communities in India don't have anything about themselves in English, and it has a history. So I want, so my decision to be to be uh, to be a publisher from this vantage point is also a political choice, you make, which is a subtext, but it is there. So in nutshell, these are some of the aspects which worked as a stimulus for me to get into publishing.
No, I mean, these are such important, ideas already, because um, as children, when we grow up, there is very little that we read which comes from diverse understandings of different ways of living and different realities of different people. Uh, Slowly that is changing, but of course the pace of that is very slow. And one of the things you mentioned, the resources and the agency of kind of taking that has maybe now started shifting. I don't know if it's shifting, I don't know if it isn't, but I'd like to know about that more from you. But also, Nantara, I mean, with the kind of projects that you guys have done, um, both for publishing, and in the other expanded lives that works have had. Um, I just wanted to kind of bring that out. It sounds like some urgencies have, uh, a similar foundation, but I'd like to know more from you,
Hmm.
please.
Yeah. No, thank you for this invitation, for creating this time and space for us to have this conversation. I was so thrilled to finally have the opportunity to meet Yogesh, because I've just been such a, I've had so much respect for your work, Yogesh, and for your publications, but this overall ethos, some of which you just shared just now also. And so, yes, this is a really lovely opportunity to chat. I think for us, the publishing work, although I must say right at the outset that we don't necessarily identify as publishers per se, like we publish, we make books, but I don't think we've quite like but then this is just an existential problem we have because we don't cannot decide on what exactly we are.
I think also
Um,
publishers is a much more fluid identity, maybe hopefully today,
yeah,
especially
our
over
understanding
here.
of what
I don't
publish
know what
is.
Yogesh has to say about that, because I know it's been very focused towards publishing, of course, but yeah, I
Hmm.
think for
No,
us,
for yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. I think forms and the options that have opened up today perhaps does open up our understanding of what the role of a publisher can be, right? For us, it really was about finding yet another way to reach people, no? Because I mean, at Photocircle, essentially what we are is a community of storytellers, people who want to be telling stories, people who want to be excavating histories, and so uh, a lot of our work is just driven by sort of this DIY, need to fill gaps, so okay, nobody is ready to publish our work, so then let's do it ourselves. And so I think that resonates when Yogesh was also sharing his experience, of self-publishing, and that's how it started. I think uh, therein itself is this sort of this decision to kind of whether, I mean, in our case, I'll speak for myself. In our case, it was like whether we know how to do this or not, we're just gonna do it and try to figure out how to do it, and tinker and learn as we go. And so it really was for us one of the many ways we were just trying to put stories out into circulation, into public circulation. And so, in addition to, say, making and platforming exhibitions, in addition to, we used to do the very early days of Photocircle when we had no money, no resources. Exhibitions, books are expensive things to make. So we would just do these projection events, basically just project your work on a wall and sit around and talk about it, right? And try to reach audiences in that way, which we continue to do till now because it's a very cost-effective way. And but the books came about also because one realizes that, books have a certain kind of life of their own, no? And so, exhibitions can be quite ephemeral, they can come and go. Books have much longer shelf lives, as we all know, and they can circulate in quite no magical and like unintended ways. They can reach places, communities, homes, schools, enter public spaces like libraries also in ways that are also actually out of our control quite a bit, like we try to control it, but then they have lives of their own as well. And so obviously we wanted to try to also have these mediums and platforms for our work. In Nepal, in the Nepali context, we do have publishers, of course. We've had publishers for a long time, but particularly for the visual medium, for photography, a lot of the work that is being published, and not to necessarily only blame the older publishers, but because how does one publish a book? As a publisher, you sell work and you regain costs, or that's the basic logic, I suppose, no? You try to make some money off of that. Whether that happens or not is an entirely different story. But for us, it was like the mountains, like that narrative, Nepal culture, history. So we would have dozens of books, large coffee table books, as photography was presented to the world in that form, of just mountain and mountaineering books, how and so books on Everest, books on Hillary, books on Tenzing Norgay, etc. And so obviously going to those publishers with our works was not working, no, like they didn't see potential to sell the work that we were producing necessarily, where and so that's how it started for us. I remember our first project was in 2009, and we wanted to for that particular project, it was called Hamra Hazurama. In English, it means our grandmothers. And essentially, it was a project where we were feeling like many of us in our personal lives, of course, were friends with people who were writers, editors, translators. But there was very little scope for professional collaborations where image makers and writers were producing work together and really sort of like, in a way where hierarchies were not that visible in mainstream media. Often, the writers are a little bit more powerful than the photographers, say, like the editorializing happens mostly. The thinking happens mostly on the end of the writing. So we wanted to try to really address this and see if we can find a way to begin with work with our own friends and colleagues And so we created this project where we paired up as one writer, one photographer, and we went out and found these grandmothers whose stories we wanted to tell. And so we ended up making an exhibition, and ended up making a book. Now, it was a huge learning curve, um, from the practical end of things to the more existential end of things. But that's how we started, and I think that's how we have continued to approach this work of publishing, making of books, circulating of books, thinking about the form itself and so on. As Yogesh, you were saying, I think this, the power that publications and books have of shaping imaginations, as you were saying, no? I think essentially what we are trying to do in our own way is that, no, by the telling of these stories, by the retelling of certain histories, we are trying to sort of, that's the offer, I suppose, that we are, that's the contribution to this landscape of narratives and stories and our understandings of different realities, as you were saying, Anshika, no? To have that there. And, we realize, because we also do run this archive and we do research and stuff, so much of what we know about the past is about what publishing material is available about certain experiences, certain events, certain communities, certain lives, no? So, and so if one were to think about, what we are producing today as books, and how that is going to shape history 20, 50, 100 years down the line, then yes, it feels more urgent than ever to be adding our own accounts to this, to what is available to for all of us to understand ourselves and the world around us in a more meaningful way. So yeah, I'll stop there for now.
You, NayanTara and Yogesh. I just wanted to bring in a point that I think you've both kind of spoken about, is the importance of language and the importance of representing stories in these books that made, and it's something that I noted what you were talking about, Yogesh, about it, the importance of being in English. And I also actually wanted to know, NayanTara, about what languages the books that you work in, you produce are made, and what is the importance of translation when you're producing these wonderful publications for, I mean, this is something that Anshika and I will cover later in our series, but what it's important for global audiences versus local audiences with this idea of language and translation. Either of you can start.
Yogesh,
Yeah, I think because Panthers Paw has started with translation, so I find this entire discipline of translation is very much underestimated in India so far. Now there are efforts we can see that in which people are discussing, talking more about translations and also doing it, and we are also witnessing, as a readers we are witnessing more translation. I'm talking about India. uh, However, like I mean, yeah, this is an important, very important discipline in publication. And given the context of India and its history with languages, why a lack of translation, lack of efforts in terms of translation so far? Not that there were no translations, but there were not many that we can see generally. Of course, like today, bookshops and like places where you can buy books are shutting down increasingly, and then most of us like order books on online or through Amazon. I mean, which is a sorry state, but uh, this is something really really important. Like, and I have if I like, I grew up, I studied with one language, which is Marathi, most of my life. English I pursued as uh, uh, a language, as my politics to be in the literature. And like just imagine that when I have to translate my entire life, which is shaped by one language have to do that in while thinking, why have to do that in English. It is something really important, because have uh, if I did not have written, or chose a translation as a medium to tell my stories, I wouldn't be visible for somebody who is not, who doesn't share my history. And it is very important for me to basically to make invisible visible, because our entire, I have this baggage of history, and which I cannot unsee, which is there and which I have to access, and I have to navigate with that. So given all these things I have with me, translation becomes very essential, because uh, if I did not have written in English, one of our book would not have got translated in German, because in India, let's say for an example, it's very hard, it's very difficult to find somebody who can translate from Marathi into Tamil, or from Tamil into Marathi. This is the one nation state we are talking about, but there is absolutely no communication between two states
Mm.
uh, in the domain of literature. And I'm not talking about just an introduction, but something like, the way we now, like by sitting in India, if I read something, an English book, let's say from UK or I can basically discuss the politics of that book, those stories, those character, basically, right? But why is it impossible for us as a one nation state? I'm talking about India, that people from two different states with two different languages, but having same history, cannot talk to each other, or they are invisible for each other, and that is very undemocratic. That existence of that fact, of despite having many languages, but we are not, there is always a saying that there is a unity in diversity, but we as a society don't know how to get educated from the diversity. We believe on our own uniqueness, hence also our language, and hence we stop ourselves from learning what is good in the other. If and if, let us say, like I have at Panthers Paw publication, we have translated books from Hindi, books from Kannada, books from Punjabi, and books from Marathi into English. And what some of our books, which were originally written in English, were translated in Kannada. They were translated in Marathi recently. Which is like for me, this is like a very as the title of this conference, of this meeting goes, that the shift for me, this is a shift, that my mother tongue is one, but I'm writing in some third language, and from that language, that the story which is written in the third language has been now getting translated in the mother tongues, or the language of the people of one particular state. So yeah, I mean, it is indisputable fact that, like, translation as a process, as a discipline, as a literary politics, can bring a huge change in India. And that is where exactly literature become very much potent. It's not just for somebody to, no matter how great a story, to hold a book and lay back and just like wander or get alienated from the real world. A good story is supposed to make you feel very much rooted to your life, which your language it is written. But if it's about people, then it does that thing. So India is full of such stories, because there are so many languages. There are so many spices, so many things, so hence so many stories. And that is where translation as something, it itself become a completely different career for anybody to pursue. uh, like the book, one of our book which is written in English. Like I have written my short story Flowers on the Grave of Caste. uh, if it was, just imagine if it was written in my if it was written in Marathi, it would never been, I don't think so that I have that social capital or cultural capital that anybody could translated that from Marathi or whichever mother tongue from into German. So I am somebody from with some particular history and one culture, politics in my hand, particular agendas. For me, it's very important to get into languages. So at Berlin we have sold 20 or something, some books around, so that is fine. But those 20 people, whoever have got and whoever will get the book, will basically take the story with them. Something would happen, and that's how things changed in my life also, as a reader, as a publisher, or as a writer. And I'm sure like in all of your lives too, there would be some books which you can't take out from your head. And the good thing about is that I have Panthers Paw has published the German edition of it, in collaboration with the translators. So of course, like this is a very new language for us, but publishing something within the domain of Dalit literature, getting translated and publishing it from India is something like I think people will take cognizance of it, and that is only possible because like people were interested in translations. So yeah, there are things here and there, but they all connect to translation and how important it is.
Mm. Yogesh, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason why German, this translation project that happened, or did it just happen like by the way?
No, last year, last year when my memoir was published, so on Facebook, see, this is very interesting, like how you make use of the new world around you, because there are random friends and like people. So I been like friends with one German professor, Peter, who had co-translated that book. So we didn't know, last year my memoir got published, and he was teaching in Augsburg University here in South Germany. He happened to read my memoir, and he was like, in that memoir he got interested in the book. So when I was here last year, he invited me to launch Water in a Broken Pot and talk about it at his university. uh, and then we kind of started talking, and then I got this book, one of the short stories, because I want to get into slowly I want to get uh, our stories or book translated in German so that I can start publishing here. That is one of the agenda, but uh, I already commissioned somebody else from India to translate that short story book, Flowers on the Grave of Caste, in German. And then this language is totally different, not only in terms of its sound, but like it's very what do you say, like very grammarly, or very like it's different. So I asked Peter if you can edit that translation of a person from India did, and he said like I can like help you with editing, but it would be more feasible to translate it newly, which I can do rather than editing it, because the most of the context for German readership has have been missing there. And that is where I understood that like knowing one language but grooming in that language is a different thing. In India, like there are institutes where you can learn the languages, but when he had read the story, and because he's a scholar of Ambedkar and Buddhism, uh, he said like I can myself translate with my sister. And I said, uh, I had already commissioned, so like that commission is like I did, and I asked the translator that I'll get it retranslated from the German natives. So he said, yeah, that is fine, and so we went ahead with that. Uh, while saying that, one of the reasons behind this getting why German and not any other language is that, like, I am looking forward to also start publishing from here, and that is the main reason. So I also have been in touch with the people from here who are interested in anti-caste literature, Dalit literature, Ambedkar, and also things got matched. And I thought, and this German edition is a product of it. So we have something to basically uh, uh, say or share with the German audience here, or the readership. So that is one of the reasons, like, very practical. Let's see, like, we might also get our one of our second book, like, they were interested in publishing in German, so we might publish that also. But yeah, let's see. I mean, this is just a beginning.
Mhm. No, that's really interesting to think about because, I mean, there's so much actually of what you said opens up so many things for me. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I got a copy of your book,
Okay.
which I managed, of Oppressors, Body and Mind, and your first essay in it on translation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, on language, but on translation also, titled English, Personal and Politics. The poem with which you ended was just so powerful. I wonder if I may take the liberty of reading it out for everybody, Yogesh, or unless you
Yeah,
want
please.
to.
No, you can do that. You can read. Yeah.
Okay, I'm reading. My father sang me in a language his father taught him. Hence, in it, his rage had clarity, his love was sublime. But I grew up much greedy. I wrote in English and kept on writing. Later, father's words turned voiceless to me. I turned deaf to his song. I grew up mean. Today, I imagine if I had a son or a daughter, what song shall I sing to them? Precisely in what language shall I sing? By Yogesh Maitreya. Sorry, I'm reading your poem, Yogesh.
Yeah. No,
but,
thank you.
but, but
Yeah.
I am.
I mean, those were some of the early reflections, no? Like, when Anshika asked me, or when Mala asked me, like, uh, what were the points from which it has begun, and I've been thinking on the same those line, like, some of the things I kept thinking as a publisher is like, migration, immigration, what role literature plays into that. Because when we go from one place to another, let's say, we don't only carry our food or our masalas or our values or maybe caste, but also our stories, and we must also share that with the people. I was sharing a while ago that I went to a bookstore here, which is like 80-90% of it was like filled with German literature, and there was English literature. But then, like, politically, this country is also witnessing a lot of basically migration from various places. Especially last year, like, Indian students were the second largest student body after China, who came to Germany to study. So there are, in such a space, like, I have begun my journey from a very, like, that the space itself was so limited or so invisible that, for me, doing all these things and trying to do all these things in terms of languages, whether it can English or maybe German or For me it's like doing my things which I told myself I should do as a publisher. you
Mm.
know uh,
No, I mean, I for one am very grateful you wrote this in English and not in Marathi because I get to read it, right? But that's what I suppose translations or language allows us to do is to reach people outside of necessarily only our own language. And I mean, I'm speaking also from the point of view of visual languages, right? And so the use of language, whether it be visual, textual, whether it be like from here or there, allows us to reach people who are not necessarily. I mean, it goes back to that earlier conversation around why we do what we do, no, like the ethos of our publishing or our work. I suppose, who are we trying to tell these stories to and why, right? And therefore, what language are we choosing to operate in? Of course, there are the practical reasons, as you said, Yogesh, if you were to be based out of Berlin and if publishing something in German allows you to do that, perhaps actually on a very practical level, and distribution is such a big thing that we all struggle with as people who make books. Literally on a very practical level, perhaps I sitting here in Kathmandu can buy your books, Yogesh, easier if
Yeah.
there's some German or European or international publishing or distribution network involved, right? Because I literally, like, I have to thank, by the way, my good friend Prathma, who lent me her copy of your book because I cannot buy your books here in Kathmandu, like, practically speaking, like,
yes.
so, and you, I'm sure, maybe will find our books, I don't know, in that German book fair you are in.
You'll find
Then
them here in Delhi,
well,
NT.
yes, thanks to Offset. I have to really, and that is why we love, this work that you do, and we appreciate the work that you do, Anshika, through Offset, because these are practical things. And like you were saying, Yogesh, I mean, we have similar experiences here, no? Like, we have so many languages here in Nepal. We publish, we sort of, from the very early days have chosen to publish bilingually everything we publish. So, but like everything we do essentially, like the exhibitions we make also in both English and Nepali. But having said that, there are big challenges even with that, right? Like we just translating something into English or something into Nepali doesn't necessarily guarantee access also, no, even to a Nepali speaker. Like if we are to get into sort of the nuances, I have very dear friends who do a lot of translation work with us, and there are a few people who I really trust and, respect in the translation work they do because they're really trying to get to the heart of things and they're not just trying to be literal and so on and so forth. And it's such an art, no, translation work, as we know. But even with those dear friends, I am constantly fighting because I suppose in the process of translating, and you would know this, Yogesh, you're constantly trying to work through large volumes of text. I mean,
Mm.
here we're talking about text, and you're constantly trying to like finish projects, and so you're constantly trying to find the most accurate way of saying something in another language, I suppose, right? So you're taking the help of, I don't know, dictionaries and other resources, and so then it becomes quite a technical process. And then there is this thing in Nepali that we face where not all Nepalis speak the same Nepali in a way. Technically, they do. But there is such a Sanskritized version of Nepali, and it has directly to do with caste also, right? So it's like only a very certain higher caste, like bound community, if I have to say it this way, who are the translators we are working with. And sometimes I myself don't understand all this Nepali because it is so high Nepali, it is so like Sanskritized, and it is so like quote unquote like official, and we also have these challenges here where, like somebody from another ethnic or indigenous community might speak a very different kind of Nepali, where vocabulary is different, where there's a whole other colloquiality that is much more prevalent, right? And so on and so forth. So we've really struggled with this. And again, when one is working on projects where you're trying to get through large volumes of texts, or for a, we run this festival and we're constantly, so now we're trying to start translation work like 6 months in advance, but it's not always possible, and so on and so forth. So these practical challenges, even as we attempt to translate and present work bilingually, we have been facing with. Now, visually, of course, there's a whole other thing, like our level of actually visual literacy in our societies, even though we live in this hyper visual society, sadly is so low. No, it's like people can't read images. I mean, somehow the image will speak to them, and yes, images are, I mean, that trope of being worth 1,000 words or whatever, and so on. But actually, if one presents only a book with only images to the average reader, they'll be like, what is this? Right? And also with images, it's like, I mean, there are so many types of visual languages also, no? So like, is it poetry, visual poetry you are publishing, or is it more historical, stuff? Is it imagery that people can relate to on a very, basic level? If you were to put it out on the street, like we try to do this, we try to make our exhibitions like publicly accessible, but just sticking images out on the street doesn't necessarily mean that they can be read, because it really depends on the visual language that is being used, I suppose. So it's all this is interesting, and I think these are things that we've been thinking about as we've been working, and like it's so unfortunate still that, again, like this hierarchy between text and images, right? If we were to produce a book just with images, as I was saying earlier, people would be like, oh, nice, lovely. It's a photo book, it's a book with pictures. But why is there no text in it? Like, you have to tell us what these images are saying, so you have to translate the images literally and put it into text. Almost. And I'm speaking when you're trying to speak to the general public, no? If we're only trying to speak to a photography community or an artistic sort of world, then perhaps that is different, right? But if we are, I mean, we are interested to speak to a larger public. So these are things that, I mean, like the so we won for the first time, we won a prize for a book we made, a beautiful book we made with Valentina Benavoli, our dear friend, and called The Public Life of Women. I mean, it's a book slash catalog, whatever. It was essentially an exhibition as it started. But, it won this prize in Paris. But then right now, literally, our team, Divas, Shikhar, and a bunch of others, I sadly couldn't go out on the road because I got sick. But they're out in they were in Birganj, which is a border town in the south of Nepal. And as of yesterday, they are in Janakpur, which is another town in the Madhya. And the books feel a little bit, to be honest, almost useless there. The books that we made feel like this very alien object there. People are like, oh, it's so small. Like, how am I supposed to engage with this thing? Or like, oh, the font is so tiny. Like, I can't read this. And, here, I suppose we could feel very chuffed about like the beautiful book that we made, but who are we reaching with it? Who, no doubt it's a beautiful book, but as an object also, that book as an object also, like what kind of fluency does it have, right, in the publics that it circulates, and what kind of engagement does it have? Sometimes, we've really wanted to achieve the best we could with, like, in terms of production quality, like, really we go to Delhi to print because it's only certain types of papers are only available there, and the binding is only available there, and I mean, even there it's not easy, but and so on and so forth. But sometimes we've had this experience where we came back with I mean, I'm not talking about this book in particular, but in the past we produced this thing and we felt so good about it. It's like this beautiful thing we'd made, and then we went into this community and somebody just touched the pages. They were like, and then they were like, NGO money, because, like, it was like this really nice paper. And so it was almost like they completely were not interested to engage with what the book was sharing with them, no? Because they'd, like, put it in a box. It was too nice, almost, in that context. And so it really makes us think, no? Like, how what we are producing is being perceived by whom, how is it actually allowing for it to circulate in certain circuits, versus actually preventing it from circulating in certain, networks, etc. So yeah, I have been thinking about things like this too. And I mean, for me, I really, I mean, honestly, would love to have some of the books we translated, some of the books we made, translated into, Hindi, not only because sitting in Nepal, at least we think India is this, like, massive, it is a massive country with more than 1 billion people. And we're right next door, and there's a big quote unquote market there, and so on. But Yogesh, you're right, like you were earlier talking about social capital. And in the world that we live in, being translated in German gives you more social capital than being translated in Bengali or Marathi or whatever other language may be in our own context, right? And so, but uh, but then the thought is also, then how do we use that, right? Social capital or cultural capital, whatever, in order to do the work that we actually want to do, that might not get funded as easily or circulated as easily and whatever. So yeah, sorry, I've been rambling. Done.
Not at all. That was really, really helpful for, I think, many things that we've all been wondering. And I mean, I'm so glad that we ended up talking about translations and language, because it's something that, we've always kind of, you always imagine there's the language that you dream in and then the language that you're meant to speak in. And I think all of us are trying to bring the language that we dream in outside into the world. And I truly believe that there are so many different ways to connect. Like, I totally agree with NayanTara. Yogesh, if you were not doing it in English, I would not have been able to read your words. I would not have been able to kind of connect with what you say. And and it's a very powerful connection that you do draw. And in some ways it's the same, I think, for what you guys are doing at the Nepal Picture Library, even and the publications that remain outside of NPL also. And I remember, uh in some ways I remember, because I was there for the edition of Photo Kathmandu when the public life of women was on the streets. And I was walking through those streets along with so many other people. And it's something that I've always thought about and questioned in the relationship between image and text, is that I think for a larger, like a mass reception, the image is always meant to do something that is larger than life, like the scale at which you experience it. Uh, Suddenly the details are not something that you're looking for, but they're kind of in your face. And I don't know if it's specific to, you know, our region, or if it's specific to the idea that we've always seen images as these large billboards, like I mean, I'm talking for like completely everybody audiences, we're not sitting and looking at photo books or things like the larger reception is this billboard that you look at, is this like grand big poster, and suddenly you have it inside this. I mean, sometimes we end up feeling like, oh, we're doing this great thing by making it portable, and like people can, put it in there. I mean, I remember when we did Guftgu, it was like they should be able to put it in their bag and, things like this. But um and the book has always had that space of solitude and reading. I mean, I'm just talking out of my own relationship with different books, and I think it just becomes so much more powerful because it's so much about the isolated moment when you are with the text as a reader, whereas the image was always looked at as a collective gathering, right? Like, oh, this is the image that we're looking at, and then we'd all look at it together. um but I'm curious to know that, I mean, today when you make these decisions on translations, on what format you'd like to go, like I know Nepal Picture Library is also what I would still consider publishing a project, but Chitwan was, completely online, and it allowed a completely different interactivity, which was from research, dealt with image, dealt with text, in terms of like the materiality of it. And, Yogesh, you're now moving to a publishing house that's India and Germany, which is very, very exciting. And I'm just curious to know that at these stages, encountering the kind of restrictions that exist and also the agencies that come within publishing, um, does that create a desire for working in specific ways, or, uh, you know, working within ideologies and aligning with certain kinds of systems in a certain way, as something that you'd like to see as we move forward to seeing more books from you guys?
I I mean, I'm very much open for a lot of new ways to publish our stories, and I don't know, like, but I can see some big scope here uh, to get that things done which we do with the publishing, or which I do with the publishing in various other forms. And I think it is very exciting to tell your story to somebody who doesn't know about you at all, rather than telling some people who know about you but who don't want to know about you. So there is a difference, so a person who doesn't know may also get interested. So and we can't force onto the person who knows but who doesn't want to know, so he has decided. So I think I'm very, my politics is very clear. Like I'm always my focus will always be like, this anti-caste lens,
Mhm.
whether somebody can write poetry with that, or somebody can write fiction, or um, essays, or whatever.
Or a
uh,
photo story, I don't know. I'm just
yes,
trying.
yes. But then for me anti-caste is very it's normal, it is commonsensical, and opposite of it is something I can't imagine in literature which I'm producing. So these things is clear with me ideologically, and then I'm very much looking forward to new forms, new collaborations, people, like different kinds of people. But yes, like my politics, like as a publisher, which every publisher has their own, is very much clear.
And I think it's also very clear with the books that you publish, and that's what makes us feel like there is hope for a very different kind of a future in publishing as well.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah,
Let's keep our fingers crossed before
yeah.
you move to Germany entirely.
Yeah, like we will be, like, of course, more increasingly publishing here too. but we will also like try to get into that language also. So yeah, like for me, and this is like publishing, it's a big struggle, and the publishers know, but for me, like it's a matter, something in which I feel, I feel enthusiastic about it. Like is there is no feeling that like, oh, this is so difficult, like, how can we get that thing done? Like for me, like how we can get the things done will be fun, so let's get into that. So yeah, let's see.
That sounds really, really great. And it's giving me some great ideas to plot and scheme over. You know,
That
I know
happening.
you're there too, Nandara.
And she goes,
I
hmm.
I think there will be a scheming Zoom meeting soon between all of us. I think all the speakers at ASAP and Offset has decided to do other expansions as we keep doing every talk. But Nandara, what about you? I mean, I know that there is, I mean, of course, there is the public, space of women, and then there was the Dalit Quest for Dignity book that you did. But parallelly, we've also seen work coming from different archives, and also something like Kishore's book, which is not an archive, but which is like, a much more contemporary photo book. Um, would you like it to be mixed and running in the direction, or is there something that you were specifically keen on for, your next project, if it isn't already in the making?
Right. No, I think, I think we are, the general direction we are going in is definitely to continue to create the conditions, create the resources, create the space for people to be able to tell stories that are important for them, right? In terms of really bringing forth, you know, voices from the margins and so on. But that is essentially what we are really trying to do, challenge dominant discourse, and try to sort of, yeah, infiltrate a little bit in whatever small capacity that we can, to mainstream onslaught of, what surrounds us, which is like social media, television, media, just commercial content, and so on and so forth. And so, but having said that, with each project, I think we're trying to sort of achieve something maybe slightly different each time. And so the nature of the project then depends on that and the way we approach it and decisions that we take along the way in terms of production, da da da. As we all know, publishing, especially photo books, can get super pricey, super expensive, and especially as I was saying, like we don't have a lot of quality production options here, so we end up having to go to India, and to print and to make the books. So but at one point, then all of that really adds up the costs, and then you're supposed to do the math and figure out how much you want to sell the books for, and then it's like, oh, this makes no sense. Like friends who are actual publishers have told me many times that we're being totally foolish and totally nonsensical in the way we are pricing the books. We're pricing the books in a way where we want it to be reasonably affordable, even at the price that we sell our books at now, are actually not that affordable if we think about the general public, right? Like who's going to spend 1,800 rupees to buy a photo book, or here,
Yeah.
so that it's a very small group of people who would do that. Of course, we then try to distribute free of cost to schools, institutions, libraries, and so on, but one can only reach so many places. And so therefore your reach is limited by that also, right? So we did this experiment a bit, where we decided to make super low cost books, print locally, because the goal was, we said, oh, let's see, if we were to be able to sell a photo book for under 300 rupees, who might end up buying this, and what audiences, what pockets of publics could we reach, right? Would it open up a whole new network of bookshops that would stock our books here locally, for example? So we made the effort to try to. Now we self-distribute also. I think that is one of our biggest weaknesses, no? Like, we haven't figured out how to find a distributor. Most distributors look at our books and they're like, it's not a very
Yeah.
profitable thing for them to take on, right? And so that we still have to figure out how to do this. Like, the distribution end of things really is something that we struggle with. But we did make these set of small books. Of course, it wasn't as easy as we thought it. Well, we didn't necessarily think it was easy, but they didn't move as much as we thought they might move, right? Because again, the medium is still not very familiar. The idea of a book filled with pictures. And so they're like, who's supposed to read these books actually? Are these history books? Are these social studies books? Are these like art books? What are these books? And so I think because the books that we're making don't necessarily fit in any of those categories very easily. They could be any of that. Of course, we argue that and we advocate for them to fit all of those categories, but it takes some work, right? It doesn't, like, it takes us, like, if we're able to physically be present and make that argument, of course I think we succeed to a large extent, but we're not able to do that all the time. You send a book out through a distributor, how are you going to make your case to every bookshop or whatever, no? So yeah, like, we've been experimenting. I think for us, it's just a way of continuing to try to figure things out. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this, Oh, I wonder if this might work, and so on and so forth. I think we've also chosen to go around, well, it's like partly a choice, partly just a necessity, but chosen to go the route of finding funding to make the book, like to be able to cover the content and the production of the book and not have to rely on sales, right? Because it feels like that approach to publishing is really purely you are relying on a market and you're relying on that demand and supply equation, and you rely on sort of then therefore making decisions as to what content you're going to publish, depending on whether there might be a quote unquote demand for it or not, right? So just a purely capitalist equation, no? So if we're trying to circumvent that, and if we're trying to sort of tell stories that don't necessarily have a demand for them, as Yogesh, you were saying, people don't want to know necessarily, if they don't want to engage with a certain history, for example, of a certain community. I mean, in a way, we are trying to like force it upon them. So then just relying on, the market equation makes no sense for us. And so we do go for the funded quote unquote option, which comes with its own sets of limitations and sometimes strings attached. And the earlier example I was saying of how then the product or the whatever the output, the
Object
object
of the book.
of the book is perceived also, no, and therefore then received and engaged with or not. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that's a good space, and I think we've got some questions coming in already. So maybe if Yogesh and Antar, if you have anything to ask of each other right now, uh, that might be okay. Otherwise, I think it's a good time to also move to the questions in the chat, and I'm sure we will all be asking each other many, many more questions after this talk. As
Yeah, I think we got a question like, where do you, Tanisha says,
yeah,
where do you find the funding opportunity? Well, like, with my case, like, I have mostly been publishing with the uh, public appeals. I'm very much socialist in that sense, that whenever there is a new book, I decide that which book should be published at one that particular point of time, and then I work with the cover and work with editors to get text done and the writers and all, and then I I make a public appeal that this book is going to be there, like this much is the printing cost. And then if we have a pre-booking, let's say like if we publish 300 books, but even 50, 60 books can be pre-booked, then we would be able to raise the amount for printing basically, and then that also includes the shipping cost for those who have pre-booked, and that is my model. So I think it is very much a socialist model, like uh, you keep people in process, in the production process, you make them a part of it from the beginning. It's not that you produce everything from your own and then tag it like 1,000 rupees, 2,000, and then you do that. You take people as somebody, because my vision behind this is publishing is a movement, and for me this is a movement. Whenever we see movement, it's like it's a collection of people who share some kind of vision in a same way. So if I'm producing anticaste literature and some readers who are interested in that, and then so they loop in, they basically like contribute via pre-booking, and I get to print the book, and then more people buy, so we sell it. If more books get sold, we keep it for expenses and printing more books. So I don't have much of experience with the. I think Nayantara could speak or share about funding opportunities.
Just to add to Yogesh's thing, also Panthers Paw also makes really amazing bundles that
Yeah.
are very,
Yeah.
they're great gifts. I have gifted them to a whole bunch of people, and I think that is also, you should just, if you follow them, like Yogesh is very diligent, he will tell about every book that's coming out, every bundle that's being prepped, and it's always a great chance to get something that's soon going to be out of print.
Mm. No, absolutely, Yogesh. That's been one of the things that I've been so inspired by, your this way of working, right? And we've been talking about this here for our context also. Is it possible for us to also, adopt this model, try it out? So it's certainly something we've actually been thinking about a lot, and we've been following your doing, and I imagine it's not, I mean, you are saying it very simply, but I imagine that also is a lot of work, right? Like one has to communicate and correspond with everybody, and then the follow-ups and all of that, and the collection, and I mean, there are so many practical challenges that we face here, of even like receiving money from Nepal, from outside Nepal, like not being able to receive money from outside Nepal unless we have a PayPal or something. We can't set up a PayPal with just a Nepali bank account, we can't send money. Like I I don't know if you remember this actually, Yogesh, but many years ago I had a Instagram DM conversation with you. I mean, I don't think it was my Instagram, and might have been like Photocircle or something. But I was trying to see if I could buy your books basically. But then I was like, shit, I can't pay in India. So I have to find a way, and there's always a way, of course, asking a friend or and things like this. But um we've been, I mean, this is how it's not just for the books and the publishing work, but for all of our work across, Photocircle, Nepal Picture Library, Photograph Kathmandu. But we do fundraising. We try to write grants and we apply for all sorts of funding. There is no easy like sector that we can do. Sometimes, we've struggled with that a lot. Like locally in Nepal, there is very little funding for the arts and culture. But because our work is also quite interdisciplinary, we try to pitch across disciplines then. Sometimes we're looking at grants that are trying to fund media projects. Sometimes it's more like art, sometimes it's more research, sometimes it's culture, and sometimes it's like going to embassies, going to foundations, all of that. Of course, lately, I've personally also actually been thinking a lot about this, what kind of money do we want to take? Do we want to take genocide complicit money or not? Do we want to take, so these are questions that we really, I think, are grappling with right now, and we do what we do because we stand in our politics, and how does that translate to issues of funding, right? And so I think this is something that we've really been thinking about now. This year we've actually said no to quite a few collaborations with quite a few institutions who do take funding from governments that unfortunately have been complicit in the Palestinian genocide at the moment. Including the Goethe, actually, right? These are questions I think we are constantly figuring out. I mean, it's never been easy. We've always had to be quote unquote inventive, right? But I think our ethos and our politics with the funding bit is, if it comes from wherever it comes from, if it comes with strings attached that we do not want to agree to, then we don't take that money. If it comes with no strings attached, if there is a genuine interest from the side of the funder or the partner where they want to genuinely support the work that we want to do, then we will take that money and put it to good use. We will stretch it and we will bend it and we will use it to do what we want to do with it, and we feel we is necessary to do. And so, yeah, that's how we work. We've been thinking a lot about, what are the alternatives to working with, are we going to be reliant on Western grants forever and ever? The alternative is then to turn to the corporate sector. Do we want to work with that money? So it's like not an easy thing, but somehow we have managed, I think, being able to just justify why we do what we do, I think has gone a long way. And so publications, actually, books actually are things that people seem to want to fund because it's like, gives them visibility also, and it can circulate in a way that will give them what they would like to have out of that support also, I suppose. So it's been okay so far, but generally we don't necessarily apply for grants for specific publications. The publications are always part of the overall work that we are doing, as I've been saying throughout this conversation. And so then that's how we sort of budget for publication projects. That's how it's worked so far, but I'm really keen to think of other ways. And so, Yogesh, I hope I can pick your brains a little bit more as we go forward.
Thank you so much, NayanTara and Yogesh. And I know that I'm sure this conversation will continue between all of us and whoever's joined today as well. I will just say, in terms of funding, Art South Asia Project does offer publication grants. We will not be offering them next year, as we have a lot of exciting programs we're doing, but we will be opening them up in another year's time. But it's an interesting conversation that actually our conversation with Anshika came out of a grant application, and this talk series was really a way of showing why it's important to fund books, but also it's really, really interesting, Yogesh, to hear your kind of guerrilla tactics of getting people to pay before it's printed, and completely, I mean, we've had this conversation, NayanTara, as well, about like really making sure the funding you're receiving is money that you can be proud to kind of be using, but also sharing that kind of organization as something that you want to work with and you want other people to know that you're working with. This conversation is the first, obviously, of our series, and it is going to be accompanied with a reader, which we've put together with similar questions to this talk, but also different, which have been answered by Rahab Alana from the Akazi Foundation in India and Shamini Pereira from the Museum of Modern Contemporary Art Sri Lanka. So please stay tuned for the release of that publication. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and whoever wasn't able to will be available online in the coming weeks. And thank you to NayanTara, Yogesh, and Anshika for working on this and being so generous with your time.
Thank you so much, and just wanted to thank both of you, NayanTara and Yogesh, for sharing so much of your process. There's so many invisible layers of work and thinking and context that are not always apparent, and I'm really glad that we could get a little bit deeper. I know there's a lot more underneath, but to get to this point so that we can go further, in our inquiries. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Anshika. Thank you, Mala. Thank you,
Thanks.
NayanTara.
Enjoy
Thank you all
Germany.
as well.
Hopefully we'll see you soon.
We'll see
Yes,
you soon. Yes.
guys, and Yogesh, I'll email you with more questions. I had a
Yes,
whole bunch of
please.
questions.
Please do that.